So good morning, everyone. And I think for most of it is a good morning, and maybe for some of it it's a good afternoon. I'm Dr. Rashid Suleiman. I work with the Center for Research on Innovation Science Policy based at India, Hyderabad. And I'm also coordinating the Asia Pacific Island Rural Advisory Service, the APIRAS network. I think on behalf of this network, APIRAS network, the Asia Pacific Island Rural Advisory Services network, I welcome you all to this webinar on strengthening the capacities of agriculture research and extension to enhance their contribution to agricultural innovation systems. Maybe a line about APIRAS. APIRAS is a network of all those who are interested and involved in extension and advisory services, which we increasingly call as rural advisory services. And we are organized under 5 sub-regional networks. We have the Agricultural Extension South Asia ESA network in the South Asian region. We have the Mekong Extension Learning Alliance for the Mekong region. We have a rural advisory services for Southeast Asia, the RASI network based out of Indonesia, which is looking at the Southeast Asia. We have the Pacific Islands Rural Advisory Services, the APIRAS, which is a network of RAS providers in the Pacific. And another network is the CACFRAS, the Central Asian and Caucasus network for research and advisory services. And we are organizing this webinar in close collaboration with the APAARI, Asia Pacific Agriculture Research Institutions, and also in close collaboration with the Research and Extension Unit of the Food and Agricultural Organization. And this is an activity which we are doing under the TAP, the Tropical Agricultural Platform, AIS Agricultural Innovation Systems Initiative, which we call as the TAP AIS initiative. We have organized several events. This is not a standalone activity. This webinar is not a standalone activity. Over the last 2 years, we have been working on a number of things under this umbrella, the TAP AIS umbrella project. We have a joint action plan with APAARI and the FAO. And we organized a series of activities, starting with a joint rapid appraisal to understand the capacities, what is the existing systems for capacity development in the region. We did an online survey to understand the research extension interface. And then this call for good practices to understand how can we learn from the good initiatives which have been happening in this region. And my colleague Nimisha will be giving you more details about the context and why we decided to organize this webinar. And with this, I will stop here and I will hand it over to Ravi Khetrapal. He's the Executive Secretary of the APAARI. Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Rashid. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all in this very important webinar. Rashid has given a very good brief focused background on why we are having this webinar and how the APAARI-APIRAS partnership is playing a role in this aspect. I would just like to say about APAARI very briefly. It's a very unique, voluntary, membership-based, apolitical organization in the region with more than 83 members, encompassing all members from 23 countries, 1 CG as a member, then a couple of research institutions, private sector, education sector, and so also the sub-regional fora like SARC, like SPC, and so on. And we are also engaged in strengthening agri-food research and innovation system in the region through a lot of activities and projects that we do, some of the global projects. Well, in the activities, what we do, one of the very important qualitative work which we are doing is with the Office of Innovation of Research and Extension Unit of FAO, where we are trying to have a joint activity right now with APIRAS on this joint action plan, in fact, for the innovation system. We have been taking baby steps to work on agriculture innovation system since past couple of years. And then came the common framework of capacity development of agriculture innovation system by the Tropical Agriculture Platform, which we had been trying to implement quite religiously in the region in terms of not only just surveys and not only any programs, but also we had been trying to blend the technical and the functional capacities, which are very crucial. And the functional capacities are the capacities to innovate, and there are so many capacities associated with that. So we had been working with the APIRAS quite closely on that. It has been a very efficient partner for APAARI. And in the light of the UN Agri-Food System Summit, as you all know, the importance of agri-food system and the innovation has been further zoomed up, and we are continuing our efforts in that direction in the region. So with these few words, I would like to stop here, but at the same time, I would like to invite our partner, Nimisha from APIRAS, to set the scene, to give a brief overview of the surveys which were conducted and some best practices which have come up in the area. Thank you, and over to you, Nimisha.
Thank you, Ravi. I'll just share my screen. Good morning to all from India. And I work with the Center for Research and Innovation Science Policy. And we are also managing the Asia Pacific Island Rural Advisory Services Network currently. And Rashid has already spoken a little bit about the JRA and the joint action plan. So just to briefly, because I'm here to just kind of give a little bit of context. So the joint rapid appraisal was conducted in 2021. So it was done jointly. That's why the name joint, because it was supposed to be done by the research and the RREOs, the Regional Research and Extension Organizations. So which was APAARI and APIRAS in Asia Pacific. And similarly, this exercise was done in Africa and Latin America at the same time under the TAP AIS project. And in the JRA, we kind of, we focused on South Asia and Southeast Asia because as the name suggests, it was a kind of, quite rapid. And we did this desk reviews and key informant interviews to be able to kind of, do this review. And as you've seen the timeline, it happened mostly during the COVID. And so after that, based upon the findings which came out of the JRA, a joint action plan was formulated, under which there are a series of activities which we have undertaken. And so some of these are already listed here, out of which online survey and call for good practices and webinars are also part of that. So APAARI had organized a webinar on, women in innovation in March on International Women's Day. And this is a webinar which kind of, follows that. And we also have been having, working groups on agri-biotechnology and agroecology as well in the region. So there's a series of efforts which are going on. So this is not like a standalone webinar, but it feeds into a number of activities. So the few, the few revelations out of the JRA was nothing new, but something which has been understood in the last 2 decades or so, but still some of these things hold kind of, they're still hanging around. Basically, lack of sufficient partnerships amongst various actors, inadequate investments, lack of policies in order to steer research and extension agencies, and especially their engagement with other AIS actors. Lack of sufficient capacity development initiatives, focus more on functional capacities enhancement, because there have been many efforts on technical capacities, but the JRA, this is what, and this is a report which was published, it is there on the FAO website. So based upon that, so for today's purpose, I'm going to kind of, delve briefly into the 2 activities which we recently carried on. So one was we wanted to learn more from what were the challenges faced by research extension organizations while they're trying to engage with each other, and what are the gaps in the research extension interface, which is really required if we wanted to strengthen the agriculture innovation systems and the capacity to innovate within the region. So this was done through an online survey, which started in sometime in February and went on for around a month and a half. And some of you who are present here also were part of, they must have responded. I'm sure many of you are the respondents to the online survey. And at the same time, we also published a joint call for good practices for strengthening AIS in the Asia Pacific, because we wanted to learn from experiences of the practitioners. So not just look at what are the challenges and suggestions which came out of the survey, but also look at what is working well, even though it is like small islands of success, but how some of the things are really happening. And so just briefly, the objective of the survey was to understand what are the capacity gaps which organizations face in strengthening capacities for innovation. And it had three parts. One was focused more on factors which are hindering or promoting the enabling environment. And the second part was focused more on partnerships and trying to understand why there are weaknesses, why partnerships are really not happening, why there's a lack of public-private and NGO producer organization partnerships. And when we say lack, we are talking about, on a scale, and they might be small cases intermittently spread over here and there. And then the third part focused on strengthening functional capacities. So we had, after a lot of effort, we had something like 148 respondents, and as you look, this is mostly the profile of the respondents. So we had more than 60% male and almost 40% female respondents, and most of our respondents came from the public sector. So here, since in a lot of Asian countries, the public sector also includes the education sector, so this also, we clubbed it together for that purpose. And this is how the respondents kind of, put themselves. So this is a graph which shows that. And as you see, we had respondents from all kinds of few retired people, even some students and international development projects and so on. So what were the major findings which were emerging from this survey was that people agreed that there are science, technology, innovation policies, which are focusing on strengthening partnerships. So as you see in this entire this slide, this is focused on the enabling environment, and most of the people agreed with the kind of, these were questions which were trying to answer, like, strongly agree, disagree, and not agree, as I'll show you in some of the other slides as well. So though most of the people agreed that there are policies, but then there was also an agreement that AIS actors are not adequately represented in the governance and management of organizations. And even when there's a participation of other AIS actors in the governance, it is not effective because of narrow or faulty selection of the representatives or dominance of a particular set of actors. So the only response, which was a little kind of, lesser here, was on this whole articulation of importance of strengthening research extension linkages. So here people were a little divided, and 60% felt that it is not really, 40% felt that it's not really articulated. And mechanisms created for systematic engagement are really not working. And more than 80% felt that there are no mechanisms at the organization level with formal mechanisms in which you interact with other AIS actors like multi-stakeholder platforms, innovation platforms, etc. So just to quickly also go through basically partnerships for development, for innovation. So there are lack of specific guidelines on how do you share resources. And when we talk about resource sharing, it can be either in terms of, contribution of different actors, and also the benefits which are accruing out of partnerships in terms of publications, profits, recognition, and so on. So most of the people agreed that there are lack of specific guidelines on resource sharing and benefits, and narrow organizational mandates constraining partnerships. So this is what it kind of, most of the people agreed with this, only very few disagreed, probably, more to learn from them. And no mechanisms to evaluate the number of types of partnerships formed and what is the collective contribution. So partnerships happen, but no formal mechanisms to kind of evaluate the health of these partnerships. And as you see, most of the people kind of, agree here to this. And functional capacity development. And so as you see here also, individuals lack capacities for partnerships. More than 60% people felt that. And capacity development efforts are not focused on strengthening functional capacities in terms of collaborative action, strengthening facilitation, co-creation of knowledge, establishing public-private partnerships, and scaling up many of the so successful kind of pilot projects. So more than 80% people felt that. And this was also kind of there are not enough trainers to help enhance functional capacity. More than 80% people across the region felt that. Limited exposure of staff to systems thinking. So this is something which also came out in the JRA, and it was ratified by the survey as well. And education and training curricula of the staff has limited content on enhancing functional capacity. So this was almost, it had 89% respondents felt that. So just going to, some of the ways forward, which was suggested by the respondents, because we also asked them to share their experiences, and some of the suggestions which came was that formal platform agency is required to bring AIS actors together, be it regional, be it at the state level within countries, be it national, or maybe at the kind of Asia Pacific level, which formulates policies, plans, and actions, brings in investments, shared knowledge, and also integrates higher education actors to bring everybody on a loop together, develop capacity systematically, leverage ICT tools, and strategically advocate for policy reform, and at the same time also fix accountability. And learning, some of the things which are not mentioned here was, learning more, kind of integrating farmer into this whole AIS and have a much more closer linkage, research and extension to collaborate much better, and further strengthening of STI policies are needed in the agriculture sector. More separate funding mechanisms are needed to be able to steer this, and basically having a much more cross-learning exchange within organizations. So I'm going to quickly stop here, and thank you so much for all your attention. I'm going to hand over to Rashid, who's going to introduce the panelists to you, who contributed good practices, which exhibit good examples and learnings on how partnerships, capacity development, and enabling environment was created within their cases. Thank you. Over to you, Rashid.
Okay. I think thanks, Nimisha, for setting the scene. I think when we started working on this call for good practices, by the time the results of the online survey have started coming, and we realized that we are still continuous. We are talking about research extension linkages, because this is a topic which we have been discussed, I think maybe from the 80s onwards, when the training and visit system of extension came. Since the 80s, early 90s, we have been discussing about strengthening research extension interface, the importance of having a more collaboration between research and extension. But I think we have not achieved much. That is very clear from the online survey. Secondly, when we are now talking about collaboration partnerships, we are no longer talking about only research and extension. We are talking about actors within the agricultural innovation system that goes beyond research extension, that also include from policymakers to input sector, to those involved in the regulations, the farmers, and a lot of other intermediaries. So I think the context has changed. So now when we talk about strengthening the partnerships, collaboration, functional capacity development, and enabling policies so that the different actors work together. So these are the kind of points which we are currently discussing. So the online survey revealed what is lacking and what are the challenges. But then we realized that there are few good examples of partnerships and collaboration, good examples of capacity development happening. So we thought, let us do a call for good practices to get such examples where those actors involved in these kind of initiatives talk about what are the challenges which they faced, what they have learned, and maybe what they think. Because we believe that learning from the practitioners is also is equally important than only keep on talking about the kind of challenges and what needs to be done. So this is the whole context in which we started the call for good practices. And I think we got 8 such cases, which I think 4 we have published. I think these are the 4 which we have published in the last 2 months, and I think other 3 to 4 are in the pipeline. So I think this is the kind of the whole kind of a context. So this I am just wanted to introduce my task initially is to introduce the speakers and request them to give a 2-minute highlight of what their case was trying to talk about, and what are the maybe 2 main highlights from their case. What could be what is the specific learning we can have from these cases. And so I think I will start with Sawatong, who contributed the first good practice with his colleague Andrew Bartlett in Laos. And I think Sawatong is working as a deputy head of the division for agricultural information at the Department of Agricultural Extension and Cooperatives, which is part of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry in Laos. He's also the National Project Director for the LURAS project, Laos Upland Rural Advisory Services project. Has more than 20 years of experience in promoting green extension. I think that is one of the things which Sawatong has been passionate about. And he also played a major role. He's still in setting up the Mekong Extension Learning Alliance. And Sawatong is also part of the steering committee of APIRAS, the Network Asia Pacific Islands Rural Advisory Services, and he represents the Mekong in the APIRAS governance board. So over to you, Sawatong. 2 minutes. What are the kind of what your case is about, and what we have learned? Maybe the 2 highlights from this case. Over to you.
Thank you, Lashish, for your introduction. So thank you very much, and I am very happy to share the lesson learned or some experience from Laos. So our green extensions approach is we focus on socio-ecological learnings, and we really emphasize on how to help farmers to analyze their local problem and opportunity. And then we ask them to prioritize and select what is the best option for their solution. And in summary, in our good practice, we provide a choice for farmer to choose which value chain or what activity that they decided to do by themselves through the supporting from different partner who really direct involved in that value chain. And from our experience on working with multiple partner that related to the value chain is really emphasize in increasing the knowledge and income for the farmer who adopt or use the practice in their daily farming. And one good thing that in this we really give opportunity for the young generation to involve in this practice. So that is for my summarize. Thank you. Hello. Hello, did you hear me?
Yes, we can, Sawathong. I think we lost Rashid.
Maybe Nimisha, you can take over.
Okay, so thank you, Degi. So maybe I will go to Gunnar, and Gunnar Kashyap, he contributed to the good practice note on strengthening capacities to innovate through North-South collaborative agriculture research in Papua New Guinea. And
It must be Rashid who's calling Nimisha now.
yes, sorry. Sorry, so he's just trying to join back. And can I ask Gunnar to introduce himself? I'm sorry because Rashid was supposed to do that. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, absolutely no problem. Hello, good morning. Well, I'm normally based in Australia, but I'm currently visiting my mother in Germany. So it's a little bit early for me. So I'm with the University of Queensland in Australia, and we've had projects in Papua New Guinea, or PNG, as we say, for many years, well over a decade. And that is what my good practice note is all about, our work and experience working in Papua New Guinea, and which is one of the biggest Pacific, well, it is the biggest Pacific Island nations in terms of area and population, and also what sometimes people say the last frontier, because in particular the area and the highlands, they've been exposed to the Western world of thinking probably for less than 100 years. So it's all very new and also very much challenging to work there. Now, from our experience, there's probably 2 or 3 things that stand out. One of the things is, well, probably relationship building. It's, I'm a soil scientist, so we're working on soil management, land management, and these things just take time. And even though many projects generally only run for 3 years, if you're lucky for 4 years, that's from a soil management perspective really too short. And to build proper relationships, not only with our collaborators, which is the National Agricultural Research Institute, but also with our farmer communities, these long-term commitments are incredibly important. And these long-term commitments, these long-term relationship building activities, they just don't happen in a few years' time. Next one would probably be, I'm working for the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. Research needs to be published. We are all pushed to publish, the famous old saying, publish or perish. Now, doing research in Papua New Guinea is faced with many challenges. And unfortunately, a lot of the research activities, what we have conducted, the data quality is not particularly good and difficult to manage. And I believe that the capacity building exercise as part of our research is probably, in that country, probably more important than the actual research activities that come out of it. That's not to say that publishing is important, but I think there should probably be more emphasis on capacity building and on-the-job training. Last point to make is in relation to NGOs, non-government organization. There is a lot of NGOs active in the Pacific Islands in Papua New Guinea. Some are civil societies, many are religious groups, and they have got tremendous entry points to the rural activities where we just cannot get to. And to work with NGOs is a real excellent opportunity. But it's not quite as simple as just starting to work with NGOs. A lot of them, they don't necessarily have agricultural background. And sometimes what we have to be careful about, that they get the right message across to the rural communities. And we need to make sure that they get adequate training in agricultural activities. And on that note, these 3 points are probably one of the main take-home messages from our work in PNG. There's lots more, but to distill it down, probably these 3. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gunnar. And I think it is very interesting to hear from you that it's not that simple and easy to have partnerships. There's a lot which goes into them. So from there, I would like to invite Murthy, and he's with the water resource group of the 2030 water resource group of the World Bank, with the World Bank group. And the good practice is all about multi-stakeholder approaches for enhancing command area water productivity in India. So this is a case from Maharashtra. And I would like to, so it's a very, very interesting kind of a case. So he's also associated as a senior consultant with the World Bank and Tata Trust in the water resources and the WASH sectors. And he has a dual master's in rural development planning from Canada, and urban and regional planning from the CEPT University, Ahmedabad. And he has more than 30 years of experience in all these above sectors. He's also worked with our Khan Development Network and the World Bank. And he has a lot of experience in working on issues related to water resource management, water supply and sanitation, local governance, policy design, and has worked in several locations in India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Tajikistan, and Tanzania. So over to you, Murthy. Can you briefly also talk about the good practice? Thank you.
Thanks, Nimisha, for that introduction. It's good afternoon, good morning to a lot of people from East Asia, South Asia, African continent, and other places that people have joined. Good to see very good participation and interest on the topic. Coming to the good practice, so this is, I'm the consultant with the World Bank's 2030 Water Resources Group. And we try to, the problem that we are trying to address in Maharashtra state specifically is about getting water use efficiencies and productivity improvements in canal command areas. Though a lot of infrastructure has been built, there are issues with water distribution, mainly to well distribution, and how farmers are using it at the end point. Is it leading to more productivity and also incomes to the farmers? So it's a farmer-centric approach, but coming from a different perspective. And when we discuss this issue in the multi-stakeholder platform, which is created at the state level and with participation from public sector organizations, private sector, civil society, and academic organizations. The idea of collaborative approach came up, saying, can we work together, public, private, civil society partnerships? It's different from the contractual arrangements. Here people come with their own ideas, resources, so on and so forth, and try to work together. It has never happened in the irrigation sector in India or many other countries. So we had to work through how to structure it, how to make it a win-win situation for everybody. At the same time, the focus is on the farmer, the poor farmer. How can she benefit from all this? So that's a good practice is all about. How did we go about? Maybe we'll discuss it in the coming question answer sessions. Thanks for that, Nimisha, and I look forward to the discussions.
Thank you. Thank you, Murthy. So I think we again lost Rashid, if I'm not wrong. So with this, I will basically invite Dr. Sagar Vadkar, and so he and his colleagues, they contributed to the good practice note 4, which was all about enhancing organizational and functional capacities of producer organizations in India through strategic collaboration. So it's a big thing. We've been hearing a lot about producer organization, and India has put some very ambitious targets on doubling the number of producer organizations. The government has put those targets. So it comes at a pretty good time. And Sagar is an advisor to the National Cooperative Union of India, NCUI, which is under the Ministry of Cooperation Government of India. And earlier to that, he was with the VAMNICOM, or the Vaikunt Mehta National Institute of Cooperative Management, which is also based out of Pune, Maharashtra, and Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Maharashtra as well. So Sagar has completed many national level studies for Government of India, especially for the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Ministries of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare, and Ministry of Cooperation. And his areas of interest include agribusiness, entrepreneurship, social capital formation, livelihood analysis, and social enterprise management. So he has been also contributing quite profusely to our Agriculture Extension South Asia network. And our association with him also goes a little bit, kind of, longer association. And thank you so much, Sagar, for contributing the good practice. Can you kindly speak in briefly about, two main features of this good practice? Over to you, Sagar.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the brief introduction. Yeah, I'm a researcher and trainer. So we were basically looking for such kind of a case wherein they are specifically addressing the key issues of the farmer producer organizations, which is a buzzword nowadays in India, and which is used as a means to achieve many ends. So in order to bring a sustainable transformation and business orientation into Indian agricultural sector, there have been many schematic intervention undertaken by central state government with its enabling agencies. And specifically the NGOs, basically, they are involved in promoting such kind of farmer producer organization. But what we see is that these FPOs, they represent very strong form of social capital, but their capacity as a smallholder member farmers of FPOs is limited in terms of the business acumen, the access to credit, talent, technology, market, and most importantly, the consumer analysis. So the issue is the self-sustainability of these FPOs, and of course, the scalability. So, so the NGOs, the Yuva Mitra NGO, came forward with their promoted and nurtured FPOs, along with the support from the professionals having a vast experience in the corporate sector. And then they floated a special purpose vehicle called Krishak Mitra Agro Services Private Limited for infusing capital and building and inculcating the professionalism and the business acumen. So that is the good practice of coming out with a special purpose vehicle to address this FPO. So the key learning which we have observed from this association is the collaboration by right-minded and like-minded people and co-creating a win-win business model. And the second is the commitment by each stakeholder in terms of the participation, the accountability, control, and most importantly, the transformational leadership in terms of having commercial orientation with social concerns. So that's all from my side. So over to you, Nimisha.
Thank you, Sagar. Thank you so much. So I'll just stop sharing this slide now, and maybe we can just begin with the first round of questions, and Cristiano can put the spotlight on our panelists. Thank you so much, Cristiano. So I think first I'd like to invite Sovathong, and we have heard about, this whole green extension, and we have also heard when Rashid introduced Sovathong how, they've been passionate about this whole green extension. So Sovathong, my question to you is that in your initiative about promoting green extension, your organization, the DAAC, partnered with a number of organizations. So why did you consider forging partnerships, and what roles each partner played? Thank you.
Thank you, Minisha. Why is our department is considered to participate or working with multiple partners? As you may know that when we talk about value chain or talk about rural advisory service, we cannot working alone in these panels. Based on our experience in the past, if we don't partner with a different partner is not sustainable after the project finish or activity finish. Particularly, we choose to working with private sectors because the sustainable of activity is related to financial return. So what activity that we support or strengthening the capacity of the farmer? So if no market, the farmer, they cannot get return from financial aspect, and then after project or activity is finished, and then activity also finished. And for another partner, like the local authorities, they are the one who is the best to help our department, because our department in the central level, and they are the one who make the links between the private sectors in their respective area, and also working with the project staff, helping the farmer organize themselves on learning. And we also have to work with the mass media, particularly with the Lao Youth Union, because they are really good. When we want to approach the young people, they are really good approach in launching the advocacy or encourage the young farmer to participate with our activities.
Okay.
That's why we have to work with many partners. And as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, we cannot avoid by working with another ministry or another partner, including development partners. Thank you, Minisha.
Thank you so much. So I think it's very interesting how you talk about, including youth. How do we make sure that, we are trying to do what we are trying to do. So partnership is really important. We understand from your case. We can't do a lot of things without partnerships. So let's maybe hear from Gunnar on your initiative in PNG in the backdrop of the North-South collaborative research, focus on developing capacities among researchers to do more on-farm, farmer-led research. So what was your experience in promoting these capacities among agriculture researchers in PNG? Can we hear a little bit from you? Thank you.
Yes, it's also a long story, but I like to cut as short as possible. I think the important thing is probably to avoid unrealistic expectations. Don't make it too complicated, and that applies to our local collaborators, researchers, as well as the farmers. It's really important to do your homework about what can or cannot be done, and that involves getting a really good understanding of the perception of how farmers work and also how the local organizations operate. And again, this phases into what I mentioned earlier, that it takes a while to learn how the local farmers think, what their priorities are, how the local organizations think, what their priorities are, and then align what you try to do with what is possible. So it's again, try to avoid unrealistic expectations and adjust it to the perceptions of the local workers. In particular, in Papua New Guinea, there are lots of cultural constraints. Quite often, what we are doing suddenly has not a high priority anymore, and we have to work around that because farmers suddenly change to what they want to do. And again, we have to understand why that happens and not, well, get upset and then try to set it right. You have to understand and work within their environment. And again, that applies to the farmers as well as the local organizations. And yeah, focus on something that is adoptable. And that again can only happen if you understand the local circumstances really well. selecting the right collaborators, where they have to have the right background, farmers as well as the local government agencies, and in particular the NGOs, what I also flagged before. There are lots of opportunities, but you have to see the opportunities in light of what is possible, and that may also require further training of the people you work together with. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think it's very, very interesting what you talk about. So it's a time-taking process. You have to keep the expectations not too high, understand each other, and I mean, have something which is, so understand farmers, understand your collaborators, and be cognizant of the cultural constraints as well while you're working at it. So from that, I'd like to go to Murthy and like to hear from you. Your project focused on creating multi-stakeholder platforms and public-private civil society partnerships in the water resource sector. So it is something which, I mean, water is a big thing and it's intrinsic to agriculture. So what are the challenges which you faced in establishing such platforms, and how did you address these challenges? Because I'm sure, I mean, everybody wants a bigger chunk of the water resources everywhere. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nimisha. I mean, it's an interesting question. There are no right answers for that as of yet. Partnerships is a very, very challenge in itself, whether it's between like-minded organizations, say partnership among NGOs or among government themselves is a big challenge. And what we are trying to do, attempted to do in Maharashtra and of course a few other states with my other colleagues, is to get all the actors involved in water onto one platform and start collaborating. So it's public sector organizations. There's several of them in each state, say the Water Resource Department, Drinking Water, Agriculture Department, Urban Development. So you have multiple organizations dealing with water as it is. Even with agriculture, you have a groundwater department. So who owns the water? So it is an input to the farmer at the end of the day, very, very important input. So that's one thing to get even to public sector organizations to come and discuss the issues on one platform. And we are adding another layer of getting the private sector and civil society and academia. And everybody says, I'm the best, I know everything, I have done this, I have done that. So how do you get everybody to come to a room and start discussing? And there are not so much trust among, say, the government doesn't like private sector thinks government is not very efficient, very slow, there's no policy environment. So that's the challenge of getting people together to collaborate, or at least start talking with each other, identifying the problem. And we are not here, we didn't, like Gunnar is saying, we didn't put a very high level benchmark as an expectation. We said, let's take what is important and what is solvable in the nearby timeframes. So that was one small, I can say from the hindsight, an approach that worked in getting to say, at least let's identify one or two critical issues and start working around that, not solve all the problems of the world. Second is to get the trust of the farmers who are going to receive all this support and assistance. They have had support, people coming and saying, hey, I will help you to do this, that, and they failed. They don't trust outsiders easily. So how do you bridge the trust deficit between farmers and so-called outsiders? Even government is outsider to them many, many times. So they're good at providing infrastructure, but not so good at providing services. So that was a challenge that we tried to face. Creating a partnership, an institutional mechanism, in the absence of any policy environment, etc. was one. Second is bridging these trust deficits and making people to talk, at least identify problems and work together. We have been luckily successful to some extent. So we brought partnerships to work in about 300,000 hectares, of which 150, the work has already started, and there are some report results that are coming out. The way we went around is dialogue. I mean, there's nothing else, no other mantra that would have been successful. More field level understanding that what farmers want, come and present it in these forums, in the partnership meetings, talk to them individually, because we need to also identify an area to start with. It's a huge state. Where do you start there? Is it one district, one village, one cooperative, etc.? Who are the critical actors? So dialoguing individually with these people, getting them together, writing these concepts notes, so on and so forth, circulating them. I think this is how we went about it. It's not easy, but that's how we did it. And we have some results to show because of all this hard work. It's not just me, but we have a team that's working on this. I mean, like any other organizations. Ajit is our national coordinator, Kavita, Meghna, Maharashtra colleagues and coordinators, Anjali. So it's a teamwork with the departments, with the private sector agencies, civil society. It's working, trying to reduce the trust deficit, talk to each other, find common areas to work in and common approaches to work in. Once you reach the ground, there are other challenges, getting the trust of the farmers, the water associations. Because for them, whatever you do, it's not how much you know, how many papers you have written. It's about, will my incomes grow? Will I be slightly better off in the next round? Whether it's, unless you are able to demonstrate that, no matter what we do, we'll not be able to scale up this initiative. So that's the challenge and the way we went about. I know it's no magic bullet, but it's trial and error kind of, you have to work in the mud and dirty your boots to do all this. I stop here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Murthy. I think from all of your experiences, especially what you have been talking about and what Gunnar also mentioned, so it's very challenging. It's not easy, especially when you have people who are specialists and have kind of, have a feeling of knowing everything. So how do you bring them on board, develop trust among each other, and then also to try to understand that we are all working for the farmers, and that is what we really need to do. And maybe from there, I will go to Sagar. And I'd like to hear from you, Sagar, that, one of the main arguments you put forth in the good practice note is developing capacities. Because I think even when Murthy mentioned about this building trust, and this is all, I think capacities are needed to be able to do that, like, what you mentioned. And so you talk about developing capacities for strengthening the organizational and functional capacities of the producer organizations. I mean, we have been hearing about, ambitious targets and all that in India as well, but it won't happen in a day. So is there a recognition for developing these capacities? So do people really understand that, you need to develop capacities, and who will be able to support POs? So who in this regard? So over to you, Sagar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, yes, government is putting a lot of emphasis on promoting this FPO. In India, there are around 54 different ministries, specifically the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, along with now newly recent formed Ministry of Cooperation. They are basically, promoting and supporting this FPO, particularly the farmer producer company and then cooperatives. So there are a lot of schemes related to it, and particularly the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, RKVI, now RKVI Raftar. Under that, basically, officially, FPO promotion started since 2011. So between 2011 to 2019, almost around 10,000 FPOs were promoted. And then based on the kind of intermittent outcome, the government of India came with a central sector scheme of promoting and formation of new 10,000 FPO under both cooperative and FPC. So under that, a lot of management support and then other facilities are being provided to these FPO with support from the private and then civil society organization, NGOs, and then federation of these different FPOs. So they are providing all those support. But yes, as far as establishing market connect is concerned and infusing capital is concerned, there are inherent limitation, because these legal entities as a cooperative, FPC, so these entities don't allow the external capital infusion in these organizations. So there where basically the key issue lies. And because of which then we need to have some kind of mechanism wherein we can infuse capital and address the key issues. That's what I was highlighting in my initial remark, that is access to credit, capital, technology, and market. So that's what there in that area, basically we see private has its own kind of competency. So they are basically now coming forward to provide such kind of facility to these FPOs. So they are kind of collaborating with the FPOs nowadays, we can see. Besides this, as far as, yes, recognition is concerned, as I said, so there are so many, ministries, so they have their own schemes, programs. So they are also giving, benefits to the FPOs and cooperatives. But as far as the startup ecosystem is concerned, yeah, as Government of India, basically they are aiming to doubling the farmers' income, doubling agricultural export, and making the Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is the dream of our Honorable Prime Minister. So under that, basically under the startup ecosystem, basically there are a lot of recognition. So specifically, if I could talk about the Krishak Mitra, the special purpose vehicle, which we have quoted in this, documented in this good practice. So they got very good recognition. So yeah, this year only on January, Honorable Prime Minister basically interacted with top 150 startup in India, in which the Krishak Mitra was one of the startup, just to understand, the learnings and how we can replicate that model. Secondly, there are Startup India Challenge program every year Government of India conducts. So in that also the Krishak Mitra secured top 10 positions. And by state government also, Krishak Mitra got secured the 5th rank in 2021. But yes, we need more, the recognition. We need more seed funding for farmer producers organizations, so that they can basically manage their own stuff and not to depend on the private entities. So that's all from my side. So over to you.
Thank you, Sagar. I think we had a very good round, of these questions. And I think Savathan started talking about markets and investments. And I think we ended up with Sagar also talking and touching upon that. And so we understand that, across the Asia Pacific, there are many, many initiatives happening. Different actors are there. So there are a lot of things which public, private, NGOs, producer organizations are trying to do in order to kind of, have ease of farming, helping farmers achieve their goals, and also achieve, the major sustainable goals. So, so the next question for us is that, we have seen now from all these cases that either there is research or extension in some cases, or in some other cases, there are other actors as well, as I just mentioned, which have contributed to the success of these initiatives. So these initiatives haven't happened on their own. So a gamut of kind of, collaborations and all that. So what are the kind of changes which are needed within research and extension in order to enhance their contribution to innovation and impact at scale? Because what we talked is only about like our small cases so far, but let's think about, if we were to scale up, and so what is needed? And you can kind of maybe think about what are the changes at the policy level which are required, what is the kind of funding support required, or regulations, or capacity development, or any other ideas which any one of you might have. So maybe I can start with Murthy, and 2 minutes for you. So what is needed within research and extension to enhance the contribution to innovation and impact at scale?
Well, thanks again for that very pertinent and key question, Namisha. Stop me if I go over the board. So I'm coming again from the Maharashtra and limited to the case study that we are looking at from that experiences. First thing is there are needs that farmers are facing, and those need to be addressed. Whether it's inputs, whether it's practices, whether it's value chains, whether it is cooperation, bringing people together, whether it's institutional mechanisms. So there's several needs that the farmers are critical issues that they need inputs and support from different actors. Second thing is that it cannot be solved by one individual organization or an entity. You need multiple entities to come together to work on that. They can't grow at different time periods. I say, okay, today I grow, tomorrow somebody grows. They have to grow together. How do you enable that to happen? There have been good practices in the past, there will be in future, but they will be very isolated small examples. They are not scalable. How do you scale up such good practices, help farmers and sustain it? So that's a big challenge. So if you look at it in a broad sense, we have public institutions and we have governments which are supposed to be mandated to work on this. So there's no big policy framework around that. Policies are mostly about what I can give to the farmer rather than how I can help farmer to sustain their livelihoods. Today I will give some subsidy, tomorrow I'll give something, the after tomorrow I'll give some crop loans, etc., etc. So you need a more holistic policy framework to reach out to the farmer, and it has to be a region or a local specific. It cannot be one policy for the entire nation or the entire state. Number two, recognize that it cannot be done by individual set of skills or organizations, and some kind of again a policy initiative and facilitative initiative to bring people together. For that you need knowledge, you need what is the need, how do you match these people, who could be the better actor to support this kind of needs, and you need some investment on that, right? It cannot happen out of thin air or somebody coming and supporting for 3-4 years. So you need that kind of skill set within the governments to be able to organize this interactions, these collaborations, so on and so forth. External agencies can support it, but they cannot be perpetually managing these things. Third would be then some kind of monitoring. Are these approaches working, or is there something needed? We always talk in thin air when we talk of impacts, benefits. There's hardly any data that we talk about. The farmer was earning X dollars and it went up to Y dollars, therefore this is a better idea. Or we invested $100 versus $80 or $120, therefore this is a more cost-effective way to do this. So we need more empirical evidence to say what is working, what is not working, and then frame or reframe our approaches and policies around that. And fourth is most critical. How do you bring the voices of the poor farmers into the whole enabling environment? What do they need? How do you keep supporting them from time to time? Not just political slogans, but real voices from farmers. How do you actually bring them as a central point of your policy making? And allocate sufficient budget and skills to enable this. You spend millions, billions of dollars on infrastructure subsidies. 1%, 2% of that would be much more than sufficient to enable all these processes to happen. And be open to collaborate with anybody, right? We have to encourage that openness for collaborations, not just make it a contractual relations. How do you go beyond contractual relation? I give you this, you supply this to. Let's work together. What can you bring on board? What can I bring on board? So all these need a focused approach, policy, a little bit of financing. We are not asking much, and a kind of skill set to manage these processes at the central level. I think these are the critical examples. And then farmers are about their livelihoods, their incomes, improving their status from A to B to C. So they will only participate if they start seeing benefits on that front. So that's very important to keep that objective in mind, not just what I can do, what I can give, or what I can supply. So from supply side to demand management is something very, very important. So the whole thinking and approach has to be reframed, I would say. I mean, reform is a big word, but yeah, you have to readjust your thinking and policy making, I think. So I'll stop there. I mean, this is not going to be easy. You need people like us, or these platforms to push this agenda on board, keep these experiences, more empirical evidences is very, very important. And coming together of like-minded people is very, very important for this. Thanks for this.
Thank you. I think you raised some very, very important points. And as we had started with, there's a lack of systems thinking. So you have also kind of, you are reiterating that we need a more holistic policy, but more contextualized, not something which we make and then we apply to every place, which we have been kind of, guilty of doing every time. And then also you have brought the whole importance of evidence gathering, monitoring, hearing the voices of the farmers, moving beyond kind of, contractual relations. So with that, I'd like to go to Sagar, because let's hear from him. What does he kind of, what does he feel changes are needed? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's very important question. So I will highlight on three aspects. So one is, yes, at the policy level. So when we look at this FPO aggregation model, so it is a process-driven activity actually, but we are going on a target-driven mode, that we want to promote so many number of farmers, producer organization. But at the base of it is the need of the farmer. So whether farmers they are facing, farmers where they are realizing the need of coming together or not, right? So that's the very basic to the aggregation model. That's what basically the one of the aspect which Murthy sir has also highlighted. So once the farmer realize the need of coming together and then understand the roles and responsibility as a member, as a board of director, as a chairman of that particular organization, then I think things would be easy for managing the functioning of these FPOs. So the focus should be on process driven. So there need to be the operational guideline of promotion of these FPO needs to be spelled out clearly in terms of the phases of promotion and formation and then handholding these FPOs. The second important aspect, which I would like to bring here, that is the attraction and retention of youth. Because if we see the India, so average age is 29 years. And so how we can, bring these youth and women into this farming, particularly the farming enterprise in the form of this FPO. So that's a challenge actually. So, so we need to inculcate these kind of these social conscience with commercial orientation among the youth and women, maybe through a curriculum, maybe at the school level, college level, we can have a curriculum on agriculture, FPO, and then cooperation, and specifically the master and PhD program on these different aspects so that they can understand in detail of these sector. Plus, as far as research is concerned, through academic institution, through these MSc, PhD students, we can promote more action research basically, rather than the impact and then other aspects, so that they can understand the process and then impact of such kind of intervention undertaken by any stakeholder. And then third thing is related to funding. So yes, we do understand this is the member-driven organizations wherein the others cannot subscribe shares, but we really need to find out some kind of a mechanism wherein the government, state government, and other investors basically can infuse the capital, not to be diluting the ownership of the members, right? So we need to work out that kind of a collaborative governance model, so that by protecting the ownership of the members and then facilitating their business activity. And then, of course, last but not least, related to awards and recognition. So we do hear a lot about the startup and then their challenge and many rewards, recognition to startup. But as of now, there are less efforts on providing such kind of a recognition directly to the FPOs, producers organizations. So we need more organized efforts on providing recognition and that kind of a platform to FPOs. So that's all from my side. Yeah.
Thank you, Sagar, so much. And I think you touched upon some of the very good points about moving beyond targets and understanding. I think Gunnar had also mentioned about trying to understand the needs earlier, and you have kind of reiterated that. And I think one of the things which has always been bothering us always is that we ask farmers to cooperate, whereas we ourselves don't cooperate so much. and which we have been seeing everywhere. And maybe from there, I'd like to go to Savathong, and you can, you're part of both the government and also the project. So you can kindly basically talk about what are the changes which are needed to add on to what we've heard from all of our other panelists. And while you do that, I'll also request our other panelists that there are many questions which I've been seeing on the chat. And if you could also take out the time to answer some of those. Thank you.
Thanks again, Nimisha. So for this point, for my perception and observation, what we need for changing for research and extension. So I think that firstly we need to change the thinking. Why I say the thinking? Because example in my country, I guess in another country as well. So the researchers nowadays we just focusing on the chance or opportunity to get funding to do the research, but we forget to look at the real happening in the clouds. That's why I think is the thinking is the big that we need to change. So both researcher and extensionists, we have to work together. So where is the real issue of smaller farmer? And then we have to come out with the concept note on the research based on what happening in different issue of the smaller farmer. Because many or million or thousand of some research already finished or study done, but we cannot use, or we use but not really appropriate or match with the real need of the smaller farmer. And so I think we have to cooperation and hand in hand working together. And the last important point that we have how different partner, how we can come out with the good enabling environment to support or influence or implementing the existing policy or regulation. In fact, we have many policy, many strategy, many regulation, but when we use in the actual, it's different understanding, different applying. That is for my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Savathong. I think you also kind of highlighted one of the important points to kind of make policies simpler, to be able to apply some of those things, because every time we focus about having newer policies, but how do we simplify them, and then how do we make them usable also? And also about changing the thinking, as I think one of the things which has, so this also shows that there are a lot of capacity development which is required at all levels to be able to steer some of these things happening. And I would like to thank a lot to all of our panelists for giving us this time. They have coming from different time zones, and they've put an effort to put up the good practices and shared their experiences. I'm sure you have a much richer kind of tales to tell, but unfortunately we have very limited time today. So we'll just take up a couple of questions from the participants. I think we only have a time for 1 or 2 questions. I can see Ravi has raised his hand. So over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Nimisha. Very quickly, a big thank you to all the panelists for really waking up some very important points.
We can't hear you, Ravi. Hello, Ravi. Can't hear you.
Today is a day of network challenge.
I know.
Yeah, I think Ravi is frozen. While Ravi is reconnecting, maybe there are two hands. Are you taking hands from the audience? Attendees? There are two, Nimisha. I don't know if you can see them.
No, I can't.
Yeah. Am I audible now, Nimisha?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry for this wastage of.
We lost you, Ravi, again. There is Marites and Kalma.
Okay.
Marites Rio.
Yeah. So very quickly, if I can continue, like one point very important which came up was on the capacity building for the agriculture innovation system indirectly by everyone. And I think the maximum challenge here is not only capacity building. What we have seen in all the global and regional projects we are implementing in Asia, the major problem is the capacity retention. You build capacity and there is an evaporation of capacity, there's a transfer of people, there's a promotion of people, people are not there. We have invested a lot on capacity building, we are doing a lot, but there is no capacity retention policy in any national system, which I think is really making us suffer a lot in our program across Asia, be it from USDA projects or WTO or ACIR, or we are doing large number of projects. So everywhere we have the same problem. After 1 year, we find the capacity build has evaporated. That is one point I thought we should just keep in mind when we talk of capacity building. Secondly, capacity building of individual, I think, has to be very carefully done. As we have suffered a lot, we should build more of institutional capacity and more of the capacity of enabling environment. That might probably manage things or balance things out, where the objective of capacity building as per the common framework of TAP, we can achieve something. Now, having said that, another point I found was on the farmers' side, too much expectations from farmers. I think we all have put, but let us not forget farmer is a human being end of the day. And farmer is also one of the political agenda of every government. Okay, so we should not, there are two aspects of the farmer's relationship with the government. One is political, one is technical. Technically, they benefit as much as they can. Politically, government wants to benefit as much as they can. And there's a lot of tussle in that. And I don't need to highlight on doubling income or tripling income, or those are all political slogans. What we have not done in Asia, I think, is we have not worked on farmers' behavior. When you talk of value chain, you talk of consumers' behavior as a very important aspect to make the value chain work. Farmers' behavior, we have not done properly, and we have not profiled farmers based on the cultural context and based on the diversity of economy we have in Asia. In Asia, we have the least developed countries, we have the developing countries, and we have the developed countries like Australia or New Zealand and so on. We don't have a clear profile of farmers in the cultural and economic context in Asia, which impinges upon what we expect from them, from the innovation and many other aspects. So these are some of the points which I wanted to quickly share. Thank you so much, Nimisha, and thank you all.
Thank you. So Degi, you could see participants raising hands, because I think I will hand over to you for a wrap up and closing, and maybe you can also invite the participants. Thank you.
Okay, Nimisha, thank you. I see the hand from Rio Maritis. His hand has been up for a while. Rio, would you like to come in very briefly? You can unmute and speak. I think the mute button is enabled for them, or no?
I don't think so, Degi.
Okay, Rio, okay, thank you. Okay, he says he thanks to Rio. If you can chat, write in your chat. Unfortunately, we don't have microphone for the participants, but he has been writing a lot in the chat, and his last message was thanked everyone, Ravi, organizers, Thank you, Rio. But if you have a specific comment or question, maybe please do write it in the Q&A or in the chat, okay? And there is Song Young-sup. Same to you, Song. I'm very sorry we are not able to make you audible, but if you can write it in the chat, I'll read it out for you. And maybe while they are writing their comments, and there are many comments in the chat, I'm sure all of you are watching them, and there is huge interaction in this webinar. Actually, I'm very pleasantly surprised that the turnout. We have 100 participants plus our 9 panelists, and physically attending, but we have over 300 people registered to attend. And you know, even though those who couldn't attend yet registered, it still shows the level of interest in the topic, in the issue that we are discussing. So it is nice to have this confirmation that this is an important topic and this is an issue that we should continue to discuss, as you have said. And there are many questions, 18 questions remain to be answered. So I don't think we will be able to answer all of these questions through this webinar, but we will take note of these questions and try to reach out to you individual basis following the webinar. And I very carefully took notes throughout this discussion, and very, very important, yet also very specific comments made by the panel members and also in the Q&A. And so those will be very much appreciated and taken. And just to kind of reiterate some important statements made by our distinguished panelists, and also Ravi and Rashid and Nimisha, as a part of a sum up, no? And this webinar was actually tap on 2 main inputs, no? One is the online survey that was conducted through APAARI and APIRAS through their members, which is research and extension and education actors in Asia and Pacific, to see what are the capacity needs of these institutions. The other one is the good practice notes. No, we have 8 in total, I believe, good practice notes submitted to us, and we managed to finalize 4 of them and publish. And my colleague Cristiano kindly shared the link in the chat, so please go to them and download and learn more about it and the main authors. And I take this opportunity to thank the main authors and contributors of this good practice note, and also APIRAS, in particular Rashid and Nimisha, for finalizing this important documentation very diligently. And some of the things that keep coming up with our discussion is collaboration, no? And it was interesting that in the beginning, was it Rashid or somebody said, old world issue versus new issue. This linkages, collaboration has been an issue throughout our history. And, you know, in the beginning, we used to talk about linkage between research and extension. Now we are expanding, you know, we're realizing there is need to collaborate and partner with many others, including private sector. And so demand is going on very fast speed, yet we are progressing very slowly. And we're still struggling to collaborate within our public sector, public research versus public extension. Yet there is huge need to collaborate with private sector, and getting private sector engaged isn't a big issue and huge challenge. And I'm currently in Laos on a mission, and I've been keep hearing about the challenges of bringing even private sector into a dialogue, into a meeting. You know, they're busy business individuals, and they have not a lot of time. And how can we even attract them and everybody has to benefit from the time they invested and make it beneficial for private sector to come to our dialogue and even start collaborating with us. So there are a lot of issues and the need for collaboration and facilitating collaboration and partnership with broader set of actors, and then how policies can facilitate this, create incentives, and the formal mechanisms, platforms are needed to facilitate this collaboration through joint planning, joint implementation, sharing and learning, and eventually co-innovation with them. And then Gunnar, you were talking about more investment and more emphasis is needed in capacity development. And capacity development is remain very critical. And Ravi, thanks for your comment in the end. You talk about where do we invest? We have very tiny investment in capacity development. Where should we put this money in? And should we put it in the individuals, or should we put it in the institutions and policy and enabling environment, which shapes the way we behave, way we interact? So it is very important to consider these important aspects. And was it Murthy was saying, how can we sort of integrate, standardize investment in capacity development? There are so much huge investment is made in the hardware, whether it's infrastructure or whatever in hardware, but can we somehow get 2%, 1% of that standardized to put in? Each time when you invest in 100 million to hardware, put 1% of that into a software, which is capacity development and partnership, all these issues. I thought that idea is very interesting because in the those who is familiar with mining and some industries, there is social, what is it called? Social, civic.
Corporate social responsibility.
Exactly. And this is mandatory percentage investment put in. And why not we don't have that in agriculture, in capacity development, in institutional development in agriculture, So that's kind of interesting thought that triggered some of interesting ideas. And then Murthy, you were talking about mini steps. Sometimes the donors, investors, and even ourselves want some big change. We are in now almost end of our 3-year project on strengthening capacity to agriculture innovation. And I'm here like, what did we change? What's different now? What did we manage to improve? It's so hard to see. Our capacity development interventions are so tiny, but then also so hard to measure and hard to see. And then I'm asking this question from everybody, but everybody has some mini stories to say, how this influenced, how this changed. And so it is so important not to ignore those mini steps and actually capitalize on those mini steps and use that many steps to build trust, and then use those many steps and use that stories to build empirical evidence and use it in our monitoring and evaluation system to demonstrate what can be done, what can be done, what impact the capacity development can achieve. So maybe I quickly stop here. Our time is up. And thank you very much in the end, everyone, for this very interesting and as well as interactive webinar. And I just take this opportunity to thank APAARI and APIRAS for organizing this webinar. And also thanks Rashid and Nimisha for your leadership in coordinating all the inputs and outputs of this webinar as well. And yes, thanks for all the people who has been contributing to this good practice notes. Those are published but yet to be published, and those are very important, and I really, as on behalf of FAO, really appreciate your time invested in this public goods. And then I also like to thank my colleague Cristiano and all other colleagues from APAARI and APIRAS working in the background, making this webinar work. And I'm very sorry that Rashid's network is not very stable today, and he couldn't join most of our very interesting discussion. But you know, for all of us, this webinar is recorded, and we will share a link to the webinar, so you can. If you're that much interested, you can rewatch or share it with your networks and other colleagues. And finally, the big round of applause for all the participants for your all the inputs in the chat, as well as very valid questions that you have in Q&A. Nimisha, I will stop here and hand it back to you.
Thank you, Degi. Thank you to everybody. Thanks to all the participants. We have not been able to answer some of the Q&A, but we'll save the chat, and I could see also some of the people have already started to talk about let's collaborate. So I guess we can think about better collaborations, better partnerships, and as Ravi also said, you know, retaining some of those capacities. We don't forget it with one project. Carry it on. And I think the same applies to this webinar. So we carry on a lot of learnings which we have acquired during this webinar. And thank you to our 4 panelists for coming over and helping us have this discussion. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, on behalf of APIRAS.
Thank you,
all.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, bye.